we will begin our inaugural session. I will invite our student coordinators to please come up on the dais.
A very good morning to all. I'm Mona Lisa.
And I am Miranam Firoz, and we will be your hosts for this session. To start our inaugural ceremony, let us seek the blessings from heaven and earth. I kindly request our esteemed chief guest, Professor Shantanu Roy, our esteemed guest of honor, Mr. Shivendra Singh, our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Shankarshan Basu, to lead the lamp lighting ceremony.
I also request our esteemed guests, Professor Sheetal Sharma, Dr. Yogendra Singh, and Dr. Bidisha Banerjee, to kindly come up for the lighting of the lamp. I would also request our very own Chandrika Sharma to intone the occasion with Saraswati Vandana.
शारदे माँ अज्ञानता से हमें तार दे माँ मुनियों ने समझी है गुणियों ने जानी वेदों की भाषा पुराणों की वाणी मुनियों ने समझी है गुणियों ने जानी वेदों की भाषा पुराणों की वाणी हम भी तो समझे हम भी तो जाने विद्या का हमको अधिकार दे माँ हे शारदे माँ हे शारदे माँ अज्ञानता से हमें तार दे माँ हे शारदे माँ हे शारदे माँ अज्ञानता से हमें तार दे माँ हे शारदे माँ हे शारदे माँ अज्ञानता से हमें तार दे माँ
या कुंदे तुषार हार धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्ड मंडित करा या श्वेत पद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युत शंकर प्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेष जाड्यापहा. May I request all our esteemed dignitaries, Professor Shantanu Roy, Mr. Shivendra Singh, Professor Shankarshan Basu, Professor Sheetal Sharma, Dr. Yogendra Singh, Dr. Bidisha Banerjee to kindly take their seats on the dais.
Now, I would like to invite Dr. Devika Sharma, a respected faculty member of Amity Institute of Public Policy, to come and introduce our chief guest, Dr. Shantanu Roy.
Good morning, everyone. I, on behalf of the Amity Institute of Public Policy, extend a very warm welcome to Professor Shantanu Roy. He is currently Dean Academics and Professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering, IIT Delhi. He is also the coordinator for IIT Delhi at Abu Dhabi. Professor Dr. Shantanu Roy, prior to working at IIT Delhi, was working as a senior project scientist at Corning Incorporated, USA. Professor Dr. Roy has had an illustrious career. He has many publications and patents to his credit. He was awarded the DuPont Young Faculty Award in the year 2004 by the DuPont Foundation. He has been facilitated with this award, and he has a number of publications and patents to his credit. I'm sure, Professor Roy, with your august presence, we are going to be inspired greatly. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for a very kind introduction. Indeed, a real pleasure to be here. And before I start, my apologies that I'll probably need to leave a little while. There is another meeting which is lined up. But I surely didn't want to lose the opportunity of being here as one of the speakers for this very interesting conference and that is lined up for all the students and faculty here. While I'm really honored to be here as to address all of you, I must admit that I have very little experience or knowledge about public policy. Really very little, frankly. I mean, for most of my life, I've been a scientist, really, in some sense, working on problems which are, at least on the face of it, quite distinct from public policy. But then we often don't realize that public policy is involved in everything, including every kind of technology and scientific intervention that we are involved in. And obviously, when in my earlier days, I really focused mainly on science and technology. Did not worry much about administration or public administration, definitely not about public policy, except that, the usual thing that everybody does in reading newspapers and following the news and having an opinion about political situations and all that. But frankly, I never had involved myself in a detailed study of public policy, which was surely my failing, because it was only later that I realized how important this whole field is. But I guess let me share a couple of my own experiences in the time that I have, and tell you a little bit how technology and public policy, at least in my own learning and my own experience, play a very, very important role. And I think I'm just going to restrict my comments to that aspect. Back in 2012 or 13, since my real, as was said, I am a chemical engineer. I am in the chemical engineering department, and for the most part, my work has been actually related to fluid mechanics, which is a kind of one area of engineering, I would say, not only chemical engineering, but many fields of engineering deal with fluid mechanics. And essentially, this is how fluids flow. So this is how water flows, or how the atmosphere has its own circulation patterns and so on. A lot of that is quite critical in the process industry, right? So it turns out that most of the products that you're using, the fabric that you might be wearing, or the bags that you might be carrying, or the food that you might be eating, is actually made or processed in some industry, whether it is a natural product or whether it is something synthetic. Nevertheless, it was gone through something. And oftentimes we don't realize the level of penetration that technology has in everything we do in our day-to-day lives, and pretty much everything we eat, the medicines we have, the vaccines we take, the t-shirts we wear, and so on. Anyhow, sometime around 2012, I had the experience of working with the government of India in shaping what is now the Bharat-6 norms. That is essentially the metric by which all vehicles are marked right now, because they represent a certain state of pollution control, which is inherent to which is absolutely essential for controlling both urban and rural air pollution. Now, it was a major policy intervention. In fact, when I signed up for it, because I guess I was pulled into it because of my some knowledge about refining standards and oil industry, and how the nature of fuel that goes into your vehicle, your car or your truck, actually affects the kind of pollution you have. And it is, of course, a public policy intervention in a very major way. And in fact, it was during those deliberations that then Planning Commission had organized. We worked for about a year and a half before that autofill policy document, which is now available on the web, which came out, which became the basis for the public legislation, went through the parliament and all of that. Anyhow, the point is that that public policy intervention was major, and I think part of the technical inputs that went into that policy essentially saw the country leapfrog from Bharat 4 to Bharat 6. In fact, India is one major economy which never had a Euro 5 equivalent. Actually, we went directly from Euro 4 to Euro 6 equivalent, and possibly the next phase will come out in some time. Now, why is this important? It's important because it affects all of us. It's important because all public policy related to environmental regulation essentially stems from a legislation of that kind, which of course becomes a standard, and then other legislations follow. What regulate industries, what regulates stack emissions from steel plants, and so on. So all of that gets into the way, and indeed, environmental regulation becomes a very important part of public policy, where technology and policy together play a very important role. And you really see it around you all the time. There's so much talk about Chat GPT and generative AI. There's a big ethics issue around artificial intelligence, and I'm sure during some of your deliberations here in this conference, you might be talking about it. But I think no issue probably affects us more in the 21st century than sustainability and climate change. And oftentimes there's confusion about this, and I'm in no position to really clear that confusion here. But oftentimes we start thinking of CO2 as a pollutant, carbon dioxide as a pollutant. I think we need to understand that short-term exposure to carbon dioxide is actually not harmful to any of us. And oftentimes this is we club all pollutants with carbon dioxide, which is actually not the case. CO2 is actually a long-term impact on the planet, and that's a very clear impact. And so it's very clear that in order for us to be sustainable, we need to really understand, the impact that CO2 has, and what we need to do in the public policy space so that the technology gets shaped accordingly. And in fact, the meeting that I have to go to next is related to that as well. So that's the reason why it's very contextual and top of my mind. One of the problems that our country is facing, and again, it's the discourse for public policy, is that there is a tendency to implant technology from the West, mostly developed in the West, into an economy like India. Oftentimes, that is not a very good idea for various reasons, but let me just highlight one. A lot of our major industrialization started in the 1970s and 80s, right? So a lot of our process plants, whether it's an oil refinery or a steel plant or a cement plant and so on, are really not in their end of life. A result of that is that it is not easy for us as a country to replace that technology with something else which is considered green by the rest of the world. The problem is different for the Western world because there the real industrialization started in the early 20th century. And so a lot of the chemical and process plants, steel mills, cement plants, fertilizer plants have reached their end of life. And because of that reason, it is a relatively easier bet that those plants had to be replaced anyway. And you replace it with something which is green, which is not emitting CO2 or it is largely based on hydrogen and so on. These are all expensive technologies, but anyway, you have to do a replacement. countries which are not so much on the growth path as yet, say countries in sub-Saharan Africa and so on, anyway have the benefit of being able to leapfrog to the better technology. But for developing countries like ours, we are kind of caught in the middle. And therefore, sustainability and climate change has a very different kind of economic impact on countries like ours, which has a technology solution, but oftentimes that may be ignored if you're not doing the public policy right. So actually what might work for India, or a country like India or China or maybe Indonesia and countries of in our sphere, are actually technologies which are end of pipe solutions. That means you don't actually replace the plant or the cement plant or the steel mill as such, but you actually come up with a totally different technological solution which will kind of plug in into your existing sphere. And this becomes a very complex interplay between technology and policy. And I think something which your group of students should be, in my view, very keen on exploring, is to come up with solutions which has a technology flavor, has a policy flavor, which can actually be beneficial to our society. And I think that is really easier said than done, but definitely a challenge worth taking up. So I think I'll stop here. It's been a pleasure, and when Professor Banerjee invited me here, my initial response was, look, I know nothing about public policy, but I guess she was able to influence me enough that I'm here before you, but it's been a real pleasure so far. So thank you, and I wish you best for your conference and for deliberations in the next few sessions that will come. And I wish that this conference is successful, of course, but that you have many more in line with what you're organizing today. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your words of wisdom. You touched upon a gamut of issues ranging from the importance of the interface between technology, public policy, and governance. And in fact, your expertise in your area of specialization has had a beneficial impact in framing public policies like the Bharat-6 norms. You also touched upon the importance of not blindly aping the West and adopting policies from a Western perspective. Our cultural, economic, social ethos is very different. We are at a different trajectory in our developmental path. So it is important for us to, follow our own path and be more indigenous in adopting our policies. You also highlighted the importance of a number of other contemporary issues, ranging from artificial intelligence and the issue of ethics in artificial intelligence, the question of sustainability, climate change, all of which are very important issues that our government is grappling with, and it is trying to incorporate and address all these issues in public policy making and implementation. And I'm sure it is important for the government and for us as students and teachers and researchers of public policy and governance to be able to ensure that there's a happy marriage between technology and public policy. Thanks a lot, sir, for your words of support, inspiration, and guidance. Thanks a lot.
Dear all, now with immense joy, I would like to take this opportunity to announce the launch of our first conference booklets. With the collective effort of our department, this has been truly a success. Now, I would request the esteemed guests to proceed with the book launch. Let's give a round of applause.
What a delightful moment for Amity Institute of Public Policy. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to all the distinguished guests and our wonderful audience for being a part of this event. Can we please have a warm round of applause? Thank you so much. In the words of our founder president, sir, Amity is not just a group of institutions, which imparts world-class education, but an experience where everyone is associated is part of a dream, a mission to see that we nurture truly great leaders. I would now request Dr. Yogendra Singh, our esteemed head of Amity Institute of Public Policy, to deliver the welcome address. Please give him a warm round of applause.
Good morning to all the distinguished guests, uh, officials of the university, and students. I, Dr. Yogendra Singh, on behalf of most respected founder president, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, and Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Balwinder Shukla, and on behalf of Amity Institute of Public Policy and my personal behalf, take this opportunity to extend very warm welcome to all to the Amity Institute of Public Policy's international conference, that is ICOP, International Conference on Public Policy, being held in collaboration with Gene Monet Module, JNU Delhi. So the AIPP is offering is a brief profile of institution offering bachelor's and master's program in public policy and public administration. It gives me an immense pleasure to announce that AIPP would be offering doctoral program in public policy and governance from July 2023. Our team of students and faculty strive to achieve the highest standards of teaching and learning and constantly evolving the evolving field of public policy and public administration. We are engaged in providing exposure to the students to this dynamic field of public policy and public administration and the challenges it involves through a host of innovative methods. So it is in keeping with these efforts that AIPP is hosting the international conference, ICOP. Hope you all and all being a part of this grand exchange of ideas. Thank you so very much once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Let us give a warm round of applause as we invite Dr. Lakshita Bhagat, faculty member of Amity Institute of Public Policy, to introduce our esteemed guest, Professor Sheetal Sharma. Please give her a warm round of applause.
A very good morning to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce you to the person who has been a constant source of inspiration to me for many years and counting. As you can see, I'm smiling ear to ear. Okay. She has played an instrumental role in the organization of this conference by pledging her support right at the beginning when this conference was just on paper. I am talking about Professor Sheetal Sharma, the chair of AIPPC and International Young Researchers Conference. She currently teaches at Center for European Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. With all her dedication, hard work, and intellect, Professor Sharma has been scaling new heights in academia and beyond. She has a long Professor Sharma has been, awarded 3 Your Money modules, 3 Your Money networks, 2 Your Money projects, as well as the prestigious European Union Visitors Program by the European Union. She has a long-standing relationship with the National Council for Educational Research and Training as a subject matter expert in sociology. Professor Sharma regularly writes for and speaks on various national and international platforms like Sunset TV, DD National, and others. She has a long list of articles and books to her credit. While there's so much more to her introduction, her CV is like 40 pages. So if you have time, you can just go online and see that to have a perspective what all she is doing. I will stop here in the interest of time and invite Professor Sheetal Sharma to deliver the special address. Please join me in welcoming Professor Sheetal Sharma.
विदिशा मैम, बासु सर, शिवेंद्र सर, योगेंद्र सर, आप सभी को मेरा प्रणाम। और प्रणाम के बाद आई वांट अटेंशन ऑफ द बैक बेंचर्स. This conference is for the students, not for the faculty members. And Vidisha ma'am, with all due respect to the formalities that I have to observe as a speaker and a guest here, I would say one thing. अब आप लोग थोड़ी देर शांति से बैठ जाओ. The organization is very, very, very good. I give you 5 star, 5 out of 5. Now, please sit quietly, calmly, and enjoy this inaugural session because this is for you. ये हमारे लोगों के लिए नहीं हो रहा है. All the guest people, those who have found out time from their busy schedule, you have seen the keynote speaker is already left. They are here for you. They are not here for these flower pots, these bouquets and all these things. Please sit quietly and pay attention at least 1.5 hours to what they are speaking and what they are going to talk to you. These are the events. I was supposed to talk about the social policy and public policy, which I'll do quickly. But before that, what is the purpose of your journey in MAT, or for that matter, these 2 days, or for greater specification, this 1 hour? These are the occasions in your life when you learn much more than what textbook is telling you. Because knowing your Hindi, English or regional language, beta, you can read textbook according to your own pace. If you don't want to read it, you can listen to it in your earpods. But these are the occasions when you get an opportunity to meet and listen to people, those who have been and experts in their area. And also, these are the occasions when you also start your journey to polish your life as a speaker, as an intellectual, as a researcher, or as a person who is thinking about something. अब think क्या करना है? Think फिलहाल 2 दिन जो है वो public policy के बारे में करना, because you are a student of AIPP. All right? Now, this public policy, what does this mean? I will tell you, even if you're doing BA, MA, PhD, whatever, to make things simple in any discipline, you have to just open your mind with couple of keys. ताले खोलने के लिए कुछ चाबियों की जरूरत है. And what are these चाबियां? What are these keys? They are 4 W's and 1 H. Very simple. Any subject, any discipline you may be sitting from, whatever background, just think about your disciplinary area. I'll give you five these mantras to understand and become a good researcher or an analyzer, if not a researcher. You have to think about what, why, when, and where. I repeat, what, why, when, and where. These are the 4 W's, and how. That is 1 H. आपने ये सोचना है कि if I am talking about public policy, what is public policy? Why public policy? When public policy? And where public policy? These are the 4 things which are woven around this concept right now, which is under lens. And then how about public policy? If you start making notes of all these 4-5 things in your diary in the next 2 days when you listen to various issues, at least you would be able to write a 500-word commentary or an article of your own. If not write, at least think about public policy for 2 minutes uninterrupted. Now, what is public policy? Public policy is nothing but a new name for social policy, because we are in a world which is modernizing very fast. सामाजिक नीति, policy is नीति ना, सामाजिक नीति की बात करते हैं तो समाज भारत का बहुत diverse है. It comes to an issue that we are so culturally diverse, we would not be able to have a uniform public policy. There would be diversity, there would be takers, rejectors, this and that. So they thought of that we are matching the pace with the Western countries, Europe se, America se, in countries se we are matching. And there, they have actually buried their social long back. I'm not saying that there is no society, there's no social element left in that, but their social is much more settled, and now they are floating in the world of bureaucratic and institutional setups. So that is why, one, the term social policy was replaced by public in that sense. And the number 2 reason is that there can be n number of reasons. Number 2 is that public, the use of public connects this to the people at the grassroots level. Because policy is much more intended for transforming whom, जिसको transformation की जरूरत है, जो already settled है, developed है, उसको तो कोई आवश्यकता है नहीं. So how do you see that public for whom it is intended gets connected to public policy? So once again, I would request students, This is not an expert speaker. I am a teacher. I do everything. Every day, these things only, please. Yes. So when we talk about public policy, we need to connect to people whom are we targeting. जब आपका तीर निशाने पे ही नहीं लगेगा तो क्या फायदा तीर फेंकने का, है ना? So public policy must have that intent and content to address to the people or find solution to the problems which are pertaining to you and me as a common public. So किस तरह की होती है public policy? What is then public policy and what type of public policies are there? There are primarily 3 types. एक तो restrict करती है कि आपको ये नहीं करना है, जैसे pollution नहीं करना है. दूसरा आपका रेगुलेट करती है, लेबर लॉज को रेगुलेट करना है कि आपको लेबर को इतनी फैसिलिटी देनी है. और तीसरा है फैसिलिटेटिंग, कि ऑलरेडी डाली हुई डेवलपमेंट को आप किस तरह पुशअप कर सकते हैं. जैसे जेंडर है तो जेंडर फ्रेंडली एनवायरमेंट बना के यू कैन फैसिलिटेट पब्लिक पॉलिसी इन दीज 3 सेंसेस. बट व्हाट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट अमंग ऑल इज द भागीदारी ऑफ पीपल, विच इज पीपीपी, पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप के बारे में आपने सुना होगा. PPP sir, as an organizational tip, I'm just taking a break in between. I'm from JNU and we often conduct such kind of programs, and there's a din raat ka difference that I see between JNU and these this setting, particularly Vidisha ji. Teachers are not there and students are so much involved in listening to what is happening, and we don't have all this so much of finances. JNU is a public funded university, that we are always under debt, so absolutely a bunch of things. With the basic minimum facility, students are all ears open to listen to कि क्या ज्ञान बट रहा है, इसको हम ले लें, है ना? And here I am finding almost everything. I am really surprised to see this. There's so much of facility. हर जगह टपक रही है facility आपकी. You talk about it, these things, this, everything. I am super impressed by the kind of thing. But nothing is in the form. The original juice lies in the content. छिलके में कुछ नहीं रखा है. The substance is the meat that you eat. So the thing is, coming back to public policy, the issue is that what we are going to talk about, whom we are targeting, like public policy ki tarah, this event is also targeted for you people. What you take away from these things? The issue of public policy is well settled in West because of couple of reasons. Because the populations are small, there is a minimum standard of living that you can ensure. There are facilities, infrastructures already in place so that people can understand. And there is a sense of civic maturity that has gone into their minds. So if I eat a banana here in Noida, I would just dispose of the peel anywhere. Ki kisi ne dekha to nahi, But if I am on the roadside, then it was very easy for me to throw it then and there itself. But if you are in West, you will walk 2 kilometers to find a disposable bin where you can actually do justice to this banana peel. What has gone into their mind? What has gone? This is sociobiology that I'm talking about. This is something that their DNA has been wired to the extent to accept that society is not yours and I am a consumer of this society. Society, or the world in which we operate, is created by all of us, and this is my responsibility as well as yours. So we have to develop that kind of civic maturity in order to understand कि ये public policy बन रही है, social policy बन रही है, कोई नीति बन रही है, कोई introduce हो रही है, कोई revive हो रही है, कोई modify हो रही है. Whatever is happening is for the public good. And this public good can only help us to realize our dream. We talk of big things, Make in India, Amrit Kaal, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, G20 and all these things. These things would remain just a symbol or an advertising gimmick until people like you and your generation gets involved in that. And why I'm targeting your generation once again? The life and the matters of most of the people on the dais are settled. They have reached up to the level that they have been invited as a speaker or a guest or as an expert, and their ideas do matter. But what you have to do is you have to take the burden of the coming next 50 years on your shoulder. And do you want a tuta-futa building to come onto your shoulder, or you want a good polished house? I hope you will have option number 2. because rebuilding something which is dilapidated is something very difficult than managing something which is well maintained and well polished. So who will maintain that? You will maintain that. And this is what you as a learner is not just here understanding the the expectations out of you as a student, not just as a person who is obtaining a degree from MIT, a good university in Delhi and NCR, not just having a degree in public policy, but how to actually realize everything. It should not just become a showpiece hanging in your drawing room. It should become evident in your nature, character, behavior. So think about all the things right from sitting in this room up to the greater goal that you have for your life, and also replicate that in your society for the nation building. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Sharma. As I promised to my audience that this lecture was packed with information and so much knowledge, and just like me, I'm sure that you all are enlightened by this special address. And I hope, ma'am, that we can continue with this collaboration in future as well. The synergies that we have found, the AIPB and Yamane module. Thank you so much, ma'am. We look forward to working with you as well.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Avneet Kaur, the faculty member at Amity Institute of Public Policy, as she introduces our esteemed guest of honor, Mr. Shivendra Singh. Please give her a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Amity Institute of Public Policy, I would like to welcome Mr. Shivendra Singh on the dais and in our, Amity University today. So he's heading the Global Trade Department at NASSCOM, and he's responsible for the global positioning of NASSCOM and industry. He has a primary role to develop, direct, strategize, and implement NASSCOM international efforts regarding market development outreach activities. In addition, Sir role entails maintaining relationship with the think tanks, analysts, partner organization. He has also worked on trade investments and policy work on number of years promoting business growth, both strategy and execution. So, and he has also spoken on various events like CNBC, Economic Times, and he's promoting these awareness events in global as well as national level. So, sir, I really welcome you on the dais to share your important opinion with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. It feels amazing to be sitting amongst so many doctors. It's not always that I get a chance like this, and it's great to be back at Amity. In fact, when I remember being engaged with Amity at different levels, it's probably goes back to about 20 years. And I was looking forward to meeting Dr. Balwinder Shukla if she's here, because she and I go back 20 odd years. The other good thing, which I'm sure all of you would acknowledge and appreciate, is my office coincidentally is right next door. So for the first time, I couldn't say that I was getting delayed. So although I come from Gurgaon, so that's a separate issue altogether. I think, you've heard specialists talk about, niche areas. Dr. Roy talked about areas, specific to BS6. Dr. Sheetal talked about specific to, what public policy is. I'd like to take you through, areas where there is a convergence of public policy, trade, geopolitics, and then come to India, and within India, because I represent the tech sector, talk a bit about the tech sector and how we are in a winning position. So that's the objective behind my talk. First and foremost, I think I was reading the release of the book that's happened right now. I was reading some of the facets And I must urge you to go through that for the simple reason that these are all very, very relevant for what you stand for. And, I must tell you that, you are in an extremely privileged position because the convergence of public policy, trade, geopolitics is going to define a lot of things which probably are going to transform mankind. So that, I think, is point number one. When I look at the scenario that we are in, we tend to call it the VUCA environment: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And why is this so? We keep on seeing the pandemic coming back in different ways and forms. For whatever reason, that's altered our lives, in various ways. And I think that is something which will continue to define things. You look at the Russian war in Ukraine, that's led to an energy crisis, that's led to a food crisis, and that has huge ramifications for all of us. Even though we are far away from where the action is in a negative way, but that there is a lot that is happening as a result of that. Then you look at the US and China. In fact, I was there just as the war with Russia had broken out, and one of my roles is to meet members of Congress in the US, in Washington. And everyone told me that, you be prepared because you're going to be asked about India's positioning on the which side is India on the Russia-Ukraine war. I call it war because it's not a conflict. And, I was all prepared going in for that. But do you believe it? The elephant in the room was China. Each meeting that I had, everyone was talking about China. So, and I was reading a research paper yesterday, which says how many Americans think what about China, and the number of people, percentage, it's a majority who think there is a kind of a war. It's definitely a technology war with China. So that is going to define a lot. So whether it's the semiconductor supply chain, which is being talked about, I'm sure you all must be following it. If not, please do follow it because that's going to define a lot. And how America, through its foreign direct product rules, is trying to ensure that the chip supply or the component gets restricted to China, and how China is, which was really going gung-ho about the whole chip scenario, is going back. And that's because of the fact that American companies are barred from supplying anything. Even American IP is barred. So, that is something which has to be seen as things move forward. And in public policy, which is at that trade convergence, there's nothing which is fixed like our lives. So America needs the support of Netherlands, Japan, South Korea, which they call the Chip 4 Alliance, and how America is working towards that. I think that's something, and how China, as you know, is kind of retaliating in its own way. You've seen the Taiwan crisis. So there is a lot of challenge in that space. The other big thing which keeps CEOs awake at night is cyber crime. As we've seen, there is a lot happening in that space now. As they call it, it's kind of a digital warfare. Now, there are good states, there are bad states, as they call themselves. And then there is this whole difference between cyber warfare, cyber espionage. Can that, from a state perspective, be done responsibly with accountability? That's a question that all of us need to give a thought to, and probably for you all to have a look at it, read it, write on that. What you think. I think that's going to be very, very critical. We heard Dr. Roy talk about generative AI and chat GPT. I'm sure all of you must be following it. And in case you are not, please do follow it, because that's that's something which is really keeping a lot of people away. Not only has it led to a lot of the big five, as you call it, investing a lot of money in generative AI, but also for a lot of governments now to react. As you know, Tesla CEO raised this issue whether there should be a pause for 6 months. Various people are reacting to it. The fact of the matter is that that's the next level of AI. If you look at research papers, they're talking about nearly $16 trillion of additional revenue by 2030, and nearly 25 to 26% of growth in global GDP by 2035, if this is done and it is done well. But then there is also the talk about what they call digital poisoning or data poisoning, as they say. Now, what is that? When you need, through generative AI, loads of data, how do you ensure that data which is there is curated, people have gone through that, and then machine learning is applied? Because if it's not, then there is going to be a bias which creeps in, and that is going to be a big problem. So, who manages that bias? Can there be one party which manages that bias? How can guardrails be set? So these are questions which all of us, as citizens, need to ponder as well. So again, food for thought for all of you, that again, this is again interjecting with policy. You've been hearing about what they call the Digital Data Protection Bill, which is there. There is the EU GDPR, and for businesses to thrive, you have to have cross-border data flows. So our government is putting together, hopefully in this session of Parliament, the bill. The bill has absolutely been revamped, and hopefully it goes well and it does lead to security, but also promoting of business. So these are areas that you have to be carefully watching if you want to be doing well in this space on a practical level. Theoretically, you can do a lot of reading and things, but at the end of the day, if you're not having a thought on these 4 or 5 areas that I've mentioned, then there is a problem. Now let's look at India. How are we and where are we positioned? I think from India's perspective, we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We, in fact, we are quite apologetic at times about our GDP levels. When there would be, most countries in the world would give their arms and legs for a 6% GDP growth. But we say no, it should be 9%, because we have to do a lot of catch up. And hence, I think it is important that we focus on doing the right things. We heard about the G20 and India's leadership in that. And yes, everyone needs to be involved in that, because whether we say that it's optics, but at the end of the day, G20 has been raised to a level we haven't seen before by any country, and it's going to be very, very difficult for people to match it. Not only because it has head of state or foreign ministers coming or Sherpas coming. One of the different brackets like Startup 20, Business 20, Digital Economy, Trade and Investment. So there is a lot happening, and I'll tell you what we are doing and why this is important. The other one is IPEF. I've been working very a lot, especially with the US, Australia, and some of the countries, because I think while IPEF has a number of key areas, like there are a number of pillars, and I won't go into that. But we are trying to see how we can get digital talent included in the supply chain pillar of IPEF. And why is that so? Because at the end of the day, and that's what I said, you all are in an envious position if you make yourselves employable. That's the key thing. Doing a degree and making yourselves employable, there is a difference. So I think it's very important that around the world you're seeing that there is huge number of job vacancies. And because I come from the tech sector, I talk about that. And we need to work on building a convergence on that. And what we are trying to do is to say, how do we look at mutual recognition of skilling standards at a global level? Create a platform where different countries, come in and talk about where the job gaps are, where the scarcity is, and look at creating the recognition together to create a win-win partnership. I think that's important. When we look at, the sustainability part, I think absolutely spot on. Whether it's 75% of our CEOs in the tech industry, it's a very, very high priority area. So while you talk about net zero by 2050, I think more than 50% have said 2040. We are talking about ESG and the level of digital maturity. There is a direct correlation on that. India, per se, and that's the sector which I'm talking about. The tech sector is punching well above its weight. Last year was a brilliant year. It was about 15 to 16% growth. And why is this growth happening? We are seeing global capability centers, with foreign R&D centers. India is the largest. We have 1,500 plus. We have 3,000 plus, deep tech startups. The growth story is primarily because of you, scalable talent. And that is where we punch well above our weight. And if there is anything which will keep us going, it is going to be this digital talent. And how do we nurture it, harness it in order to make people employable and continue to grow and the India story. And that's where, tech industry per se has about nearly 55% of service exports, more than 50% of offshoring happens to India, the global offshoring. So all of that is a good story for all of us. So we are in a good zone, but nothing can be taken for granted. But for you, students, I think it's very, very important that all the areas that I mentioned, where there is a convergence on trade and public policy, is the area I would urge you to focus on, because that's going to define the growth. And if you're part of that story, you would have arrived. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, that you shared the public policy angle from international perspective by taking different countries and how it is important to build build collaboration between different business and markets to strengthen the role and the subject of public policy. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
I would now like to take this opportunity to call Dr. Bidisha Banerjee, Deputy Director and Associate Professor, Amity Institute of Public Policy, to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Shankarshan Basu. Please welcome her with a huge round of applause.
Thank you. When we were talking about who we should have our keynote speaker, I went back to a person who I always depend on. So thank you, Shankar, for being here. So this is the formal introduction of Dr. Professor Shankarshan Basu. He's currently the Dean of Amrit Modi Business School at Ahmedabad University, but he's also a professor of finance and accounting at IIM Bangalore. He's a PhD from the London School of Economics, and he has a bachelor's from Presidency, Calcutta, and IIT Kanpur. Now, this is the formal part, which I'm just going to read. He serves at the board of the Federal Bank Limited, is a director, premier, and a founder, member, and secretary of the Indian Finance Association. He's also served in the boards of companies like the Clearing Corporation of India Limited, the Bangalore Stock Exchange Limited, and Billcare India. He was the president of the Asia Pacific Risk and Insurance Association and served in the international selection panel of fellows for the German Chancellor of Fellow, a fellowship run and administered by the Office of the German Chancellor, between 2014 to 2020. The list goes on. He has a long, impressive resume, but I think it's best to hear him. So I welcome Professor Shankar Shandasu.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you, Vidisha, for those very kind words. Generally, students don't say are not so nice, as you know. Sheetal I would agree with it. कि जो भी बोल रहे इस साइड पीछे तो और कुछ ही बोलते रहते हैं. So once in a while, it's good to hear that. But thank you very much, Vidisha. Thank you very much, Amity, for inviting me and in a sense agreeing to listen to me. When I was, and I also have a very dear friend sitting out there whom you will hear later, Aniket. So Aniket knows me roughly from the time when, the age of all of you guys, at least for the last 25 odd years. And when I was 25 years back, I would never care about sustainability. What was sustainability? And sustainability didn't mean, the only thing sustainability meant to me, and I don't know how many bongs are there in this room, but definitely there's Vidisha, and there is obviously me, whom I believe is more authentic bong from being from born, brought up, and lived all my life in Calcutta, except for the working life. And I still go back to Calcutta, and I think that's the best place to be. My whole definition of sustainability was food. How do I sustain myself, and how do I kind of figure out what is the next meal that I'm going to have? That was my definition of sustainability. But obviously, over the last 25 years, that definition has changed for a variety of reasons. And not that food has gone away, right? And I can pretty much challenge to a lot of you guys out here that I can take you around Delhi food joints more than what you guys can collectively get together and figure out.
I can vouch for that.
So it's just got added. But anyway, on a more serious note, coming back, you see, sustainability is not something new. Sustainability is nothing that we are talking about new. It's a new word that I think has been coined. And I would not say it's fashionable, but it's kind of for some reason stuck on for the last 25, 30 odd years. I think the first time people really came out talking about sustainability in this context was sometime in the mid-90s. With the start of the Kyoto Protocol and things like that in the early 90s, early to mid-90s, when people really started talking about sustainability. But sustainability has actually been there in everything. And before I get into a little more detail, let me give you an example. And we are actually, and that's something what the keynote speaker, Dr. Shantanu Roy, also alluded to. And we can get into the same rut again. Today, it's becoming increasingly fashionable for all of us to say that let's go and buy an electric vehicle. Let's get rid of fossil fuel and let's go buy electric vehicles. Right? This is the same story repeating 100 years later. If you go back and look at what happened to New York about 100 years back, we are doing exactly the same thing. So just consider yourself, and just some of you have to look up in those old Western classics. New York 100 years back was still the financial capital of the world, but was a very dark and dank place to live in. What was a major source of transportation in a city like New York? Remember, it's 100 years back. There is no Ford has just come into being. So the T Ford and the Ford 10 have just about been launched. Nobody really knows much about it. What do you think was the major source of transportation? And it's a rich city. Horse carriages, right? And what do horses do when horses are being driven around the city at whatever speed? And then add the weather, add the climate of New York on top of it, which for about good 7-8 months of the year, except for 3 months, June, July, August, or maybe July, August, September, is perennially wet, cloudy. And we complain of landfills in India today. This was what New York was. With all the money power that the world had, or half the money power of the world still being concentrated in New York, this was what New York had. So when Ford came up with the first, Daimler came up with the car, but then when Ford introduced the T Ford in US and the Ford cars became very popular, New York jumped at it. Because this was to them, in the short term, a very obvious, clean, nice city that they could again rebuild. They didn't have to stay in this overhang of dank odor and all of that, and they could enjoy the city back in its prime. The honeymoon lasted for a few years. And by the 1950s, people realized the downside of having so much of the pollution effect that we are now talking about of using fossil fuel. Cut forward, fast forward 100 years. We're doing the same thing with EVs. What does EVs run on? Batteries. What are we going to do? At some point, if all of our cars have to be replaced by electric vehicles, and then these batteries will have to be replaced. Highly, dangerous products. Where will we? Two or three problems. First, where will we dump and destroy all these batteries? When it's 2 batteries, 5 batteries, 10 batteries, 100, 1,000, nothing will happen. When it's going to be 1 million batteries a day, what will you do with them? And that is essentially a key argument of sustainability that one needs to kind of keep in mind. That we do things for the short term, but we do not realize or we do not bother what happens in the longer term and how that could have a fairly negative effect, even offsetting some of the goals that are the benefits that we may have got. Second, we want to have the batteries. Very good. How do the batteries get charged? Power. How will we generate power? Majority of the power even today is generated out of fossil fuel. Right? So to charge the environment, to kind of keep the environment of Delhi free, what will we do? We're doing exactly what we're doing right now. We'll go and set up power plant somewhere else, and we will kind of create a mess somewhere else. Is it really worth it? And therefore, in that context, instead of looking at such arguments, we should actually, sustainability today should actually look at, in some sense, probably going back to the drawing board and redrawing from scratch as to what should be a more sustainable model. Should we even bother about looking at this, or should fossil fuel, maybe fossil fuel in a certain moderation is not bad. But does everybody need to have a car? Let's go back and ask that question. Does everybody need to have a car? If you have an effective public transport system which runs for 24 hours, and there is a reasonable connectivity between the last mile connectivity is taken care of, do I really need to have a car? And unfortunately, the models the world has used to curbing ownership of cars and for a variety of reasons actually have failed. Because Singapore has tried a model, which is the Singapore model, which says that if you want to buy a car, you actually have to pay a huge amount of tax. This is not the running cost and all that. There's a one-time cost that you have to pay, which could be as high as about $25,000. Plus, you have the CBD charges and all that, which might make buying cars fairly expensive. But the problem of making it expensive is human psychology gets you into a position that the more expensive the thing is, the more desirable to the people who cannot afford it becomes. And therefore, you strive to get that without realizing what the implications of that is. And therefore, that model, actually, Singapore has failed. While Singapore has succeeded in many, many counts, but on that count, the number of vehicles in Singapore has not come down. Finally, it's only in recent times when they got the MRT and all in place that Singapore has kind of somewhat stabilized. So, one of the arguments that I have in all terms is that, we need to kind of relook at sustainability, not just from an incremental perspective, but I think it's time that we, rewrite the whole equation or rewrite the whole story independently. I was just sharing a story this morning with Aniket and, so my son who's in class 10, we were having a joke last night. So suddenly we said that day after tomorrow is a holiday. So why is it a holiday? It's Ambedkar Jayanti, Ambedkar's birthday. So obviously this is a joke, right? But, and anybody out there, please don't take it personally. With all disclaimers, it's a pure joke. So he says that, why should Ambedkar Jayanti be a holiday? So obviously you know this, you are in class, going to class 10. You're studying, don't you know who wrote the Constitution and all that? He says, yes, I know. But why should that be a holiday? Because he wrote a document which was not so perfect, which is why we are having to edit it every now and then. Every day we have to write a new law to edit the Constitution.
Due to legitimate security concerns.
What was that? Anyway. So anyway, so this point is that
legitimate concerns a large military bases. The bases come with their own set of challenges. They face climate change. For example, glacial retreat of the Himalayan range due to atmospheric warming is a cause for alarm. In the long run, in the long run, water availability for irrigation required for farming would be affected. Okay. Moreover, Indian military is often the first responder to major natural.
May I request Ms. Shriyanshi Bose to mute her mic, please?
Oops! Oh God.
Sorry. So please continue.
That's okay. Okay. Sustainability issues. Question is who sustains more? Anyway, okay, let's get back. So anyway, the question is that, I mean, from a sustainability perspective, so all of this is good. And again, my point is that I think we should go back and relook at it from the base and not just do an incremental thing. More importantly, I think one of the other things that we should be also very careful about, and this is a debate that keeps on happening. Increasingly, we live in a globalized world. So today we cannot afford to ignore what is happening elsewhere in the world. At the same time, there are national interests that prevail. And we've seen this taken at various points in time in various different directions. The first notable one was George Bush when he withdrew the US out of the Kyoto Protocol in 2004 unilaterally. Subsequently, Trump when he pulled US again out of the COP and all of this. The question is this a game of, and we should not, in my opinion, we should not look at sustainability as a game of optimization or a game of maximization of benefits. It's more of a game of a compromise. Because if, I might do certain things in a certain manner, but if I don't survive, the rest of the world doesn't survive, then I also don't survive. I cannot survive on my own. It is not that I can go and stay up in a small cave in the Himalayas and think I can live all my life without having to interact with anybody else. Otherwise, we would not be the creature that we are. So therefore, for our sustainable, our development, and sustainable, even a survival, I think we need to kind of adopt a policy of or an approach of compromise rather than simply kind of jumping up and saying, okay, I will do this because it's in our best interest. That seems to become the trend, but we also need to kind of look at a little more. It has to be a give and take in that process kind of thing. Also, economic viability is something which you need to kind of look at. And that is where the argument that Dr. Roy also mentioned becomes very important. Just because something has worked elsewhere will not necessarily work out here. Just because it has worked in whichever part of the world it is. Please understand that the market and everything else is very, very different. Inherently, we are very different people than what are. And India is an even more challenging thing. Interestingly, the conference is obviously by looking at India and Europe. Pretty much Europe is nothing but, in some sense, India is a replication or Europe is a replication of India, given the number of states that come together. And I'm not talking about the size and all that, but if you look at Europe today, it's kind of a conglomeration of, again, back to being about 27 states. We keep on varying. When I was a student, I learned India had 22 states and 9 union territories. That went up to 30 and now down to 28, and then all kinds of things that happen. So the thing is that even a common policy across will not work across the country. What works in this part of the country will not work in the south of India, and what works in the south of India will not work in J&K, and so on and so forth. So you need to kind of have flexibility enough to be able to design policies which will kind of take care of local needs. And local needs become very paramount in terms of how this processes and how these approaches become sustainable. If you well, not the best of examples to use, but reality of it is, you see, for about 200 years, both the British and the French were colonial powers. The British were colonial powers out here, and some other parts of the world. The French were colonial powers in Africa. Both stopped being colonial powers about anywhere between 70 to 60 years back, maybe 55. look at the relationship that the British today has with its colonial, with its colonies, and the French relationship with the colonies. The French never amalgamated with their colonies. And therefore, even today, there is a very distant relationship that kind of remains. I mean, yes, there are a lot of colonial people, I mean, the French colony people who want to go into France, and there are certain political benefits that might be there. But the society never accepted it. Whereas, if you look at the way the society, both in the UK and in India, is kind of, forget the politics of it. Let's not get into politics out here, but look at the way the society is amalgamated and therefore become a sustainable process is kind of very, very relevant and very important, very interesting to look at. And that's why we still today, beyond a level, really do not have a level of animosity towards the colonial masters. Yes, politics has its own place and an own role to play. So I think that's very, very important. And one needs to kind of one needs to customize it at a local level and relate to it, which the Britishers, for whatever the good or bad, 200 years back, realized that they need to kind of amalgamate with the system out here in whichever capacity and in whichever manner to kind of create that. And that's what kind of got them got us where we were or got them on. So as I said, this will kind of, the compromise has to be the argument. We don't necessarily need to reinvent. So while technology will become a game changer and is always going to be a game changer, we don't necessarily need to reinvent, right? Just for the sake of reinvention. There are existing technologies or maybe even modifications of existing technologies which could kind of help us do a lot of things. Maybe we just need to change the way we operate. We need to kind of look at a certain way of looking at it. But the whole technology, we don't need to shun technology. At the same time, we don't need to reinvent technology. But we cannot do away with technology. To say that we will not use technology any longer today is not going to be a world, an environment in which we can sustain, because the rest of the world will not, gel with us. And we also have to be mindful of how the rest of the world is kind of working on it, on its manner. So we have to kind of look at that, and then we have to kind of, work through that process. However, there are going to be random events. There are going to be random events. There are going to be random events like a COVID kind of a thing coming up or something, which is completely unprecedented. But one of the things that COVID also taught us is when survival becomes a crisis, people do collaborate. Sustainability becomes very important as a collective entity. And the best example is that the speed at which, or the lightning speed at which the vaccines were developed. Even today, that is the fastest ever in the history of mankind that any vaccine has got an emergency use application. None of the vaccines have yet got full-fledged application usage. So for all of you out there, if you remember when any vaccine came out, in India, we've actually made a mistake. We've called the vaccines by name. So in India, your COVID vaccines are called Covishield, Covaxin. There was a third one which was there, I forget, but that someone that were trying, and then it went out, the nasal vaccine. Anyway, Covishield and Covaxin was there. Rest of the world, what has it been called? It's never been called by name. So though the formulation, at least the Covishield formulation is the same. Even in the UK, it's called the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's called the Pfizer vaccine. It's called the Moderna vaccine. Because it's what is called an emergency use application model. The full testing has not yet happened. Right? Prior to COVID, the shortest time of vaccine has been approved was 6 years, which was the polio vaccine. The polio vaccine took about 6 to 6.5 years for it to be approved. We had a COVID vaccine in less than 6 months. We had it a little later, but if you look at the US, in about less than 6 months, we had a COVID vaccine. How was that possible? Because a huge amount of international collaboration that we got into. And what it also shows us is that we therefore cannot live in isolation. And then both sides, because the COVID argument also spread in that manner, because people argued that initially people never thought that COVID would spread beyond. Because I still remember, I think February of 2020, we were in London and I was having dinner with him and we were saying, oh, that's an event in China, and China has done all these things in the past. We should get some data from China to do some work. I mean, it's not going to affect us anymore. This was around the first week of February. And by the middle of March, we know what happened. Who would have thought that this would be a spread in this manner? So these kind of random black swan events will happen. And the world will come together to collectively respond. But the question is, do we need these random events to happen for us to respond in that sustainable collective manner, or should we kind of do it in a more organized manner? And therefore, we should also think about what we would need to do in terms of, do we need to jump into doing things randomly, or should we also think about what will benefit a larger majority and not just have a shorter term benefit for us? If we can get down that road, I don't think we're going to achieve that in the short term, not even in the medium term. But if we can start even moving down that road, I think we would have made the world more sustainable and definitely survive it, get ready to survive for a much longer time. Thank you.
So, Shankar, you spoke about four things which are my favorite. First is food. The second is Kolkata, and the third is New York. Who doesn't love New York? But the fourth, I think you talked about is technology, and the way you described the vaccine development for COVID very well illustrates what technology can play in public policy and how policy making can impact technology, something that we do dwell in our classes and we need to do more. So thank you so much. Glad you could be here and very happy to have you part of this keynote address. Thanks.
The Amity International Public Policy Conference and International Young Researchers Conference would like to express their appreciation and gratitude to our esteemed guests who have honored us with their gracious presence at this conference. I would like to request Professor K.V. Ravi Kumar to felicitate our guest of honor, Mr. Shivendra Singh, with a small token of appreciation.
Thank you so much, sir. I would like to invite Professor Naga Lakshmi to felicitate our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Shankar Basu, with a small token of appreciation as a gesture of our gratitude.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I would request our HOI, Dr. Yogendra Singh, to felicitate Dr. Sheetal Sharma with a token of esteem. Thank you so much, sir. While thanking the Almighty for His countless blessings, we are here to spell out words of thanks, for which I would like to take this opportunity to invite Dr. Bidisha Banerjee, the Deputy Director and Associate Professor at Amity Institute of Public Policy. Dr. Banerjee is a distinguished academic and consultant with extensive experience in both university and think tank settings, specializing in public policy and analysis. She has not only served as the chair of the conference, but also has played a pivotal role in ensuring its success. We now kindly request Dr. Banerjee to deliver the vote of thanks. welcome her with a round of applause.
Thank you. There are many thanks due, and I really don't know where to begin. The list is very long, and there is another vote of thanks at the end of the conference. So I'll make this one a little shorter. But first of all, thanks to Amity University for allowing this conference, the founder president, the chancellor, the vice chancellor, and the management team at Amity University. Great thanks to Dr. Sheetal Sharma, professor and PI of the Your Morning module of JNU, for being so generous with their funding and being on board right at the very start when we were planning the conference. A big thanks to all of our keynote speakers for coming on board and being part of the inaugural. Thank you all the HOIs, the professors who are here. It's really a very big support to see all of you. We are a very young department, Amity Institute of Public Policy, and it's great to have the support of Amity, the support of all other institutions in India and abroad to make this possible. And of course, we have a wonderful faculty comprising of Dr. Avneet Kaur, Dr. Lakshita Bhagat, and Dr. Devika Sharma, and our HOI, Dr. Yogendra Singh, and not to mention the students. If you were part of this conference a month back, you would know everything is being done by our students. There are some students who've been in it right from the beginning, and the others who've come on board a little later. But this is for the students, by the students, of the students. So the real thanks to you students. Thank you so much. We will open tea shortly, and we would like you to join us for tea. Thank you. The conference begins now. We have wonderful paper presentations lined up for you in the lower ground floor of the F3 block. So please join us there. Thank you so much, and welcome to the conference. We can sit. We're going to have tea. Yeah. So, we can mingle with somebody else.
Yeah, I think that will be good. I will leave in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Vidisha, I have an online session 11:30.
All the participants, please proceed towards a foyer where you have tea, and all guests stay. Please, all guests stay back. Thank you.